Is domestic abuse an epidemic? Because people will wonder, what's going on, what's happening, how can it be an epidemic? The only time you hear about abuse is maybe once in a while on TV, those kind of things. It can't be that bad. Does your church need domestic kindness to prevent or expose abuse? It's one of those things that, if we don't have a problem, why would I need a training class in that? And then, is domestic abuse happening in your church? And a lot of times people say, well, I'm not aware of anyone. I haven't heard of anything specifically. So I really don't think there is something going on. And I'm going to share some things with you. Now, you hear those numbers and you say, well, we've got to be able to start doing something if those are really truly the numbers that are going on out there. But you also may be saying, well, those may be numbers, but it's not happening in my church, not at that level. There's no way. What I would tell you is you're fooling yourself. It's sad to say it is no better in the church than it is outside the church. So that's why I think it should help you to start answering some of these questions. I'm going to share with you some of my experiences from the domestic kindness studies and also my history. I've done a few classes now, and one of the things that I hear when we start the class is similar to what we already talked about. Those numbers can't be correct. Well, even if they are correct, it's not happening in our class. It's not happening in our church. It just can't be right. And one comment that I found very interesting was a person spoke up and said, well, here we go, bashing men again in regards to how they act. I remember saying after that is like, okay, why is learning God's word and how to treat people kind a bad thing? It should be how we treat each other, whether it be male, female, or any relative in our family. Now then, one of the things that has happened each time in the classes that I've taught or been a part of, people start to speak up. They start telling stories in their lives that no one was aware was going on or it happened in their life. Very painful stories, very painful stories. One of the saddest stories that kind of heard was, they were in a relationship where domestic violence was happening, and people knew it was happening, but never said anything. And so this person was alone. They had no one to talk to. They were ashamed. And after this relationship finally broke up, people said, yeah, we knew what was going on. It's one of these hidden things that are happening. This violence is happening, but no one wants to talk about it. And we need to stop that. Had one person talk about their childhood and said, my dad was brutal. And it was, what a word, brutal. When you think about it, he would say that, it was mom getting beat, the kids getting beat. He goes, but the outside world never saw it. All they saw was a kind man outside the doors of the house. But once the doors of that house closed, as he put it, was brutal. And that's just a sad thing to see happen. I'm also going to give you a little history about me. And, I'm retired. I worked with Nestle for 42 years. I retired a few years ago. I'm the youngest of 4 brothers. My dad was an alcoholic. He was very abusive. He basically died from alcoholism. But I also look back and I say, well, what was his role model on how to be a parent? Where did that come from? Because my family was not a family that went to church. I had a brother. My oldest brother was what I call a child of the 60s. So for those who are old enough to know what that means, he just used drugs a lot. And he basically fried his brain and himself, and he died at a young age. And myself, and this is something I only started to share once I started to become involved in domestic kindness. I was molested as a child. Why don't we talk about these things? It's because you feel ashamed. You feel like it's not something that you would ever talk to anyone. My wife may have been aware, but no one else was ever aware. Now, on a positive note, I married my childhood sweetheart, a person I started dating in high school from my sophomore year. We had 2 great kids, great athletes, great academically. But then my daughter, around 8th grade, was raped. You know, and as a dad, you want to protect your children, especially a daughter. And then throughout her life, she dealt with eating disorders, in and out of hospitals. And then in May of 2009, committed suicide. So when you hear about my life, it's a mess. But I'll guarantee you, within your churches, within your family, within your friends that you have out there, there's messes out there. There are things that have happened in their life that they don't talk about. But we should, so that it can help others to feel free to have these discussions and to really start to learn what domestic kindness can provide for you on what a healthy relationship should look like. So we should share these stories that are out there. We should help people, to give them the tools if someone is in trouble, to see the red flags that are out there, and to help them. So now it's like, well, what are you going to do? You know, you've heard my story. You've heard my experiences in the studies. Do something. Get your church involved. Drive awareness. People will talk about things if you make it safe for them to talk about. I was amazed with the amount of stories that came out in our classes. And then from that, the people that come forward and say, I know someone in my family who needs help. And you have the tools and the information to give them so that they can get help. When you look at 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men are in their lifetime had severe violence happen, it needs to stop. It needs to stop. It needs to be eliminated. We as a church community need to be the lighthouses to our communities.